welcome everyone to the Feldenkrais Summit, Move Better, Feel Better. And we're on the athletes theme today, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Vladimir Latocha, who is a Feldenkrais practitioner in France, as well as a former Olympic swimmer. Interestingly, he also has a PhD in math and is an associate professor at the University of Nancy. And he combines his fascination with science, sports, and of course, mathematics to bring a very unique approach to our theme today, Feldenkrais for swimmers. So Vladimir, I'm delighted to meet you and welcome to our summit.
Thank you for having me.
So of course, the first question that comes up for many, many people is your journey. How did you go from swimming to mathematics to Feldenkrais, or was it mathematics and then swimming and then Feldenkrais? Maybe you can tell the people a little bit about how that unfolded for you.
Yeah, so I started swimming when I was a child. So for quite a while, I was just doing normal, going to school as a normal child and then going to sports. And at some point, my level went really fast to quite high level. And so I started combining both studying and going to the training with high level sports. And later on, actually, this led me to go to the Olympics. That was kind of a natural consequence of just, following your path, and that went really well. But then, as for the Feldenkrais, my let's say biggest regret is to have known about Feldenkrais too late in my career. So I had stopped swimming in 97. And I started my PhD because I could not really combine sports and PhD because that was not so easy. It's much easier when you're a student because you know when the exams are. So after that, I stopped swimming and I discovered Feldenkrais. I went to a seminar, a 3-day seminar, and then I was okay. I was feeling really good in my body. That was about breathing. So I was like, yeah, it's a nice thing. It's a nice period of time I spent in a nice place and so on. But I didn't know how actually massive the effects were until I went to a pool. And I just like jumped in the water just to have a swim. And I was so amazed by the sensations I had in the water that I was really hooked. And that was like the combination with swimming was major and at that moment because being a swimmer, like for 15 years, I was looking for small differences that make differences. It's like trying to swim faster. And so I kind of explored some of it. And then after this 3-day seminar, I was just on another level in my sensation, in the quality of my swimming. So that's why I'm here now. Like Feldenkrais was really, really, it had an impact.
So in that moment when, you were swimming and had this experience of, I'm going to put words in your mouth and say greater embodiment or more improved ability, did it feel logical to you? Did it feel mysterious to you? How, in that moment, what was your kind of emotional reaction to the situation, and how did you, as a scientist or as a mathematician, want to investigate that?
Well, in that case, I really it's as if it was yesterday. I swam, and my first strokes, that was front crawl, I felt my ribs, opening a bit. So that there was this homogeneous way of being on the water with my hand being with the pressure of my hand being really homogeneously in my whole body. And most of all, this was new to me, the movement of the ribs. So it didn't feel magical. It felt like, wow, this is a really, really, how can I say, it's a method that really has results, something like this. Because before that, I had tried many things, Um, and for instance, I remember there was a method that was good, but I could not really feel the effects.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, I felt the effects and I wanted to explore more because it's just being a swimmer. I think most of the swimmers, they like to explore the consequences of what they do. So it's like you do this kind of a training and you get this kind of results. So that was quite natural to imagine that that was like that Feldenkrais was somewhere in the middle between what I want to explore and what the results, what are the results. And in between, Feldenkrais is just a way of exploring.
So coming back to the ribs for a moment, um, I mean, I know a lot of people when they think about swimming, both more experienced swimmers as well as people who just swim for fun, they don't think about their ribs. They don't feel a connection with the ribs. It's more like just arms and legs moving.
Mhm.
So maybe you can say a little bit more about how the ribs play into the ability to be an effective swimmer. And I guess especially with the crawl, because that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So one very simple thing is it's also linked to what an arm is, so how it is connected to the body and how it moves. So quite often people think not, I mean, they forget not only the ribs, but also how the arms work. So a popular image, I would say, is thinking of your arm as the arm of a doll. So it's like the joint would be here, and the only thing you could do is something like this, but it's not how those shoulders work. And the shoulders, like up to this point, you use one joint, and then if you want to go further, you need the scapula to slide. And if you want to go even further, you need the ribs to start to come into play. So it's just natural to I mean, that's just an example to show that you need to know, or you need to investigate, you need to start a dialogue between what you want to do and actually how your skeleton moves. And if you're adding restraints, you're just like it's not working as good as it could. So I don't know if it answers your question.
Well, it just opens up more questions because, the question then comes up, well, if I'm just using my body naturally as it was designed, wouldn't my ribs and my scapula and all that just join in naturally? Why do I have to learn to integrate my ribs or understand my ribs in order to be a better swimmer? So in other words, people sometimes think that it just happens naturally. Why you, who were, top of your field, had not discovered that? What is it about the way they teach swimming, or what is it about the way you describe the attitude of the body, in terms of that a lot of people have this idea that the arm ends right here, but why doesn't it happen naturally?
I liked it very much when I read from Moshe Feldenkrais something about actually the span of what you discover. And there are all these degrees of freedom and all these possibilities, and there is no reason. I mean, it's so wide that there is no reason why anybody would have discovered everything and would have discovered everything perfectly. So this is just about thinking that, yeah, there is like a huge amount of possibilities. And it's quite actually what is natural in our lives is to not have discovered everything. So I think that's good news because it just gives us the idea that actually we have a lot of untapped potential, that we do good. I mean, it's okay. We are not worse than the others, but there are so many things that we can learn. And sometimes it's as simple. I remember also, as you said, I was a good athlete, and I remember during my training this lesson when you are lengthening your arm to the ceiling.
Hmm.
And I was like, when I started to feel the scapula sliding, I was like, oh, what's happening? Wow! So I was really like this, and then it connected to these moments when I went to an osteopath to try and, correct something or fix something because I had pain. And then it connected like, oh yeah, I remember he told me that actually my scapula was not sliding enough. So that there was, these connections are difficult to make if you don't understand that actually the scapula could really slide. So it's, well, to make it short, because I tend to, to be like overexcited. To make it short, it's really like there is no reason why we would have explored everything and perfectly. So there are lots of things to discover.
So it's, first of all, I love that you're overly excited about the sliding of a scapula. I mean, I think that that in itself is, sort of like a microcosmic statement of what happens when we begin to become interested in who we are and in how we are. So, going back to this idea of the sliding of the scapula, I'm sure that there are people watching today, and I know that even when I work with people, sometimes people go, "It's what?" It's There's an image that many people have that the scapula, or what we call the shoulder blade, is actually fused to the rib cage. And so
Exactly.
if I don't have an understanding of how it can slide and assist me in my movement, then I can't really do the movement, which of course then goes back to Moshe saying, if you know what you're doing, you can do what you want, right? So for you as a scientist, I mean, when did the science aspect of Moshe's work come in? You had this sensation, you had this experience, you had this awareness. How did the science start to play in for you?
Well, there is this, I felt quite comfortable with his attitude of exploring, testing, and checking and retesting. So it's not something I mean, I wouldn't say it's very strange to do this. So that's one thing. But the other thing, it's more mathematical. And I tend not to tell my students about some of the things I consider, or how I kind of find models of what we do. But the mathematical background led me to imagine that, for instance, when you have these degrees of freedom, and it's like you used to live on a plane, as like in the geometry, and then you add a third direction, which is a new understanding or a new degree of freedom, something new in your self-image, and then you start living in a space. So that's a very, it's not something very spectacular, but that's just an image. Sometimes to my mathematical, my colleagues in the mathematics department, I tend to explain them about Feldenkrais in that way. Like it's just like adding some new directions in your, like vector space, or this kind of things. But I don't think for the general public is very, exciting. But it's more like this. It's way of thinking in terms of modeling. I think everybody has their own models, and mine are. I'm quite comfortable with my, what some people call the math brain. It's.
So it's
I think I prefer to share about sports. People
well,
are usually much
you
more
were
curious
reminding me of
about.
that book, Flatland. I'm sure you
Oh
know
yeah,
that book,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
So it's exactly that, but I've never thought about our work from the perspective of being able to perceive other dimensions, and yet
Yeah,
there is this other dimension, which is the experience of myself,
yeah.
this notion of experiential anatomy, which you could get excited about no matter who you are, when you start to realize that you can go inside and experience yourself even if you don't know anatomy necessarily.
Yes,
So
definitely.
so
And,
so
and
go
also
ahead.
this, like as you say, like the flatland, it's really about imagining how it is to live in a two-dimensional space, which is a flat land, as the name. And I like the idea of, like, for us, it's possible to imagine how you live in a two-dimensional space, But for them, it's really difficult to imagine how we live in a three-dimensional space. And then I could recommend actually the book by Michio Kaku, which is called Hyperspace. If people like this kind of discussions, it's really fun. Like
Well,
how
I found that book really hard.
was it? Or maybe. So anyway, so there's like, how is it to have like a fourth dimension? What we would see if a fourth dimensional being would come to our space and so on. But anyway, like as for the Feldenkrais exploration, it's really thinking that before you meet a new possibility, it's really hard to imagine how this will look like and how you will experience it, and how you will, how your life will look like when you have this new possibility. And then you get like, usually you have some steps, and then you make, you take a new step and you discover something which kind of, wow, there is a wow effect sometimes. And then you get used to it. So you get used to it, and then you wait for another wow. But actually you have to remember that actually your ability or the number of dimensions is expanding. So it's just, I don't know if it's a good way to promote Feldenkrais through linear algebra, but I don't think so, but maybe.
Well, I don't think that going for the wow from a linear perspective actually works, does it? It's never step A, step B, step C.
No.
There's maybe some other equation that brings together a certain number of elements where there's an unexpected wow, right? The wow the reason it's wow is because we didn't expect it, right?
Yeah.
And so if I'm trying to be very linear, that doesn't necessarily happen. But wow, this is getting philosophical, so let's come back. Because I understand that you also do work with swimmers as a Feldenkrais practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are people that are watching who are interested, who are swimmers and other kinds of athletes as well, who would be interested to know how you work with swimmers. Is it a different approach than when you work with somebody like myself? Even though I love to swim, I wouldn't necessarily go to a Feldenkrais teacher in order to improve my swimming.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, like, one of the main differences that we have with, let's say, usual clients is that when I go and work with swimmers, we are very clear on what they want to improve. Because sometimes with usual clients, some people come and they say, I have, let's say, pain in my neck, and it's not always easy to find something that they really want to achieve. Whereas with swimmers, it's much easier. So as a practitioner, I would say it's easier. But then from the swimmer's side, what we do is actually we do, there are two very different kinds of motivations. One is when a swimmer is injured. So unfortunately, sometimes swimmers are injured, and it's quite easy to get injuries in swimming because you have like these repetitive movements. So whenever there is something which is not really, let's say, soft and sliding and you know, this very high quality, sooner or later you will get some pain, and then you have to find a solution. So there is one motivation is this. So in that case, actually we try and see what's happening. So to give you a very simple example, I worked with an athlete. She was quite a high level. She was in a junior national team, and she had pain. She had pain in the middle of the back and in the shoulder. And when I saw her swimming, there was something like, probably there is something that she doesn't understand about how the rib cage and the pelvis can be, you know, let's say independent. We say differentiated, but they can move independently, and they don't have to really, she doesn't have to work hard in order for this not to move. So that was one thing. And the second thing there was something in the shoulder, but I was suspecting that actually it had to do with the same thing. So what we do is she went out of the water, like use the towel because it's quite cold. It's only 28 degrees Celsius. So anyway, lying on the table, I got her to feel what's happening with her thoracic spine. Like we do some exchange about the theory to understand which parts of the spine can be used for turning around this axis. And then when she gets it, like she starts to get it, we do some more exercises to integrate and to give like some new, let's say, instances, you know, of this differentiation between the pelvis and the upper body. And then she goes back to the water and then she starts to get it. And in the end, we come back to the shoulder so that she understands that the shoulder actually, if you want to swim, and there is one part of your arm that goes above the water. And if you try to keep your chest flat on the water, actually it's really difficult to have your arm above the water. So then there is another integration to understand that actually if she's able to do it, it's easier for the arm which is in front, and it's easier for the arm which is back. Wrap it, make a knot, you know, a nice present paper, and she could swim again. And actually the injury was, let's say, solved. I like to say that actually we are not therapists, but some people come with a problem and they go away without.
So that brings up a few questions for me. I think the first, well, it's like I'm not sure which order to ask you in, but the first and obvious question that everyone wants to know is, did you actually have your table by the pool?
Yeah. Yes, okay. I did. Yeah.
And is this something that you do often?
Yeah, I started doing it because I think I started doing it with her, and I found really relevant because we can go back and forth. You know, sometimes she just like she goes to the water. We can see what's happening, and then we start working on the table, and then she goes to the table. She goes to the water again to integrate, and then comes back. And sometimes we do it like maybe twice. You know, so it's actually it's very much like we do with normal clients when we ask them during the session to just walk in the room. It's just integration time. And in that case, actually, for a swimmer, we're not trying to improve the way they walk. So we need to be at the pool.
Right. No, I think it's absolutely wonderful. And it's a reminder to all of us that the whole point of a lot of our work is to be able to allow a person to do what it is they want to do, whether
Exactly.
it's golf or walking or swimming. So, you know, that's one of my questions. Another question is maybe a little bit more complicated in terms of your own philosophy, both in working with regular people, non-swimmers, as well as the swimmers, because you said that when a swimmer comes, they're easier to work with because they have a specific goal. I want to swim better. Where another person might just say, I have a pain in my neck. But couldn't you say that a person who comes in with a pain in their neck has a goal, in the sense that I would like to now be without pain? And maybe it's more difficult to unpack the mystery because it's not a specific activity, but it's still the same approach, wouldn't you say?
Well, there is. It really struck me during my training when there was, I think, a demo by Alan Questel, and I remember him, you know, interviewing the trainee who was receiving the lesson, and he asked her, like, what would you like to do? And she said, well, I don't want this pain. And he replied something like, well, okay, this is what you don't want to do, but what would you like to do? And it really stuck in my head. And nowadays, I mean, now I think I'm also, I connected it to something I really liked also, with, you know, this thing that people in hypnotherapy know a lot. It's something like we don't understand the not, you know, do not think of the color blue and immediately everybody thinks of blue. So I really make sure that we focus on something that people want, instead of trying to forget something that they want to forget. Because actually each time you say, did you forget it? Oh no, I have it back.
Right.
So it's not just a trick. I don't know how to say it. It's something which is really important. This also brings me to another image I like. It's people who do canyoning. They are told, like, go, I mean, really look where you want to go. Do not look at the rocks where you don't want to go. So it's I think it's the same idea. It's much easier for people to evolve to something that they like if they can focus on something that they like. And it's a bit tricky for the practitioner, because sometimes you have to let them know that actually the thing that they came for is not there anymore. Otherwise, they may think, well, nothing happened, you know, during this session. So it's like, how do you remind them that actually they had a benefit without, you know, pulling them back to where they wanted to go out of? I don't know if this makes sense.
It does make sense, and it's interesting and very tricky, because it's I agree with you. You have to find the right words, because often if you remind them that they came in with that kind of pain, they start to look for the pain.
Exactly.
They start to try to find it again, because it was part of the self-image, right? That this is who I am. I am this person with a pain in the neck. And what you reminded me of, that's very important in our work, that, you know, I mean, we all know that Feldenkrais borrowed from everyone, from Coué, from all these different people who worked with different aspects of hypnosis. But this idea of redirecting our attention, that when we redirect our attention in another way, then we see other possibilities, right?
Yeah. Just a small thing. You mentioned Coué. You know, Nancy. Actually, I lived like a few hundred meters from his house.
Oh, now is that a
Like
coincidence?
Coué is like, I can go and visit, you know, Coué's spirit.
Maybe we should, for our viewers, because probably there are a lot of people who don't know who he is, maybe you
Yeah.
can say just one or two things, because of course he did have an influence on Feldenkrais as well.
Yeah, Coué left a method which was called, I think, I don't know in English, but probably positive autosuggestion. Is this something like this?
Yeah.
Um, and the thing is, people ridiculed his way of, you know, doing things. That was at a time when people started to study, let's say, hypnosis and this kind of suggestions that you can make, and how people's condition can improve dramatically just by using the right word or the right attitude or something like this. So it was ridiculed because people said, well, it's just thinking, like everything is all right, and, you know, positive thinking, and it's not working. But I think the theory is coming back, and there are some valuable tools. So it's like, one argument I sometimes use is that actually many people are experts experts at negative autosuggestion. So people may be really good at limiting themselves and actually making all sorts of things happen in their bodies. So I would say it's just fair to let people work with positive autosuggestion. It's just like, you know, being very neutral just for the sake of balance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my, you know, advocacy for Coué's method.
Right. Right. And when Feldenkrais was young, he actually did a translation of Coué's book,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I think is available somewhere. So
In
that is
ebook,
something that has, What, say that again?
I think it was in Hebrew. I think
Yeah.
he made the preface and the
Right, he
introduction.
wrote an extra chapter or something like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
to
yeah,
the
yeah.
to his version, right? Which, if you look at it, you can see the antecedents of how his thinking would eventually lead into the Feldenkrais method.
Mm-hmm,
So another question that came up for me as you were talking about this particular swimmer that you were working with, and you said that you showed her how to begin to differentiate, and then you said, I don't remember what it was, but you gave a little bit of a distinction
mm-hmm.
between differentiation and moving parts separately.
Yeah.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about, because of course when people are swimming and just using their arms, they're using their arms in a separate fashion. Can you just speak a little bit to what is the difference between this isolated movement and
Mm-hmm.
differentiation?
Well, the as you say, like sometimes people may think that there are some kind of, these cute toys that you have in maybe it doesn't exist anymore, but in your bathtub, like, you used to use kind of a spring, and then you would have like it was flipping in the bathtub, like swimming like this. So quite often people have this, let's call it like a partial understanding of swimming as being like a floating body with arms like going in the water like this and just like pushing water, and this is how you move towards the other wall or towards, I don't know, if you swim in a lake or something like this. Whereas one very different approach is to think of the water as, let's say, something that you can rely on actually to move your body with respect to the water. So that's one thing. It's not like moving water and then that would move you, but it's really like trying to move with respect to the water. And to do so, actually, you need something which is not, how can I say, which is really homogeneous in your body. So in order for it to be homogeneous, you can think actually of your arm as being like a big tent, which starts like from the sternum all around the rib cage, in the back, and so on. And in that case, actually, you can have some kind of you can really feel like you're being on the water, and this is spread. It's much more elastic. And this doesn't really fit well with an idea that things are separate. If things are separate, actually you have like some strength and power which is localized, and you tend to go through. So I'll try to gather my thoughts. So there is this like need to make it more like sheets and less like sticks, something like this. And another thing is sometimes when people think of being flexible or being able to move some kind of, am I able to move my rib cage with respect to my pelvis? Sometimes people think of it as being isolated. So you try and separate things, but actually when you swim, you need to make it coherent. So you need parts to move together. It's maybe that's the whole point. Like move together doesn't mean that they move in the same direction.
So I like the image of the sheet, because if I was thinking of the sheet kind of diagonally, that if like one corner of the sheet was my
Mm-hmm,
right arm, then the other
mm-hmm,
corner of the
mm-hmm,
sheet would be
mm-hmm.
like my left hip or something like that. I was
Yeah.
thinking about, how in Mabel Todd's book, she spoke about how the arm begins in the opposite side of the pelvis.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and so if I think of it as a sheet, then you also get that fluidity
Yes.
that you get when a sheet is moving
Yes. Yes.
versus the sticks that are just moving in place. So
Exactly.
is that, would you say that that's would that be a useful image for any swimmer, you know, as they're going into the water, to think of that diagonal relationship flowing through themselves? Would that be something that you would?
That's one thing, and definitely, I mean, really, when it's more, you know, it's more and more popular in Europe. I don't know in the US, but you know, the fascia, all these envelopes, which it's more like three-dimensional, and sheets are like really connecting one another, and I really like the image of a tent, you know, with one, like the sorry, like a big hand. That's good for swimming, you know, big hands. So so the hand would be like the end, some kind of the end of the tent, but then you have like all this, like a teepee with lots of places where the teepee is attached to. So in our case, I think it's quite nice to really look for something like all around the ribcage. So actually, the listeners could just palpate all around the ribcage, like in the front, on the side, and then discover that actually the ribcage goes quite far down in the back. So if you, and then you can think of your arm like all along your spine. If you have this image, I think it's much easier to feel something like you're just like letting your arm lengthen, and then there is like the whole, or maybe like a parachute, you know, the whole parachute gets tense at the same time. So the tension goes like all around the rib cage, and then it makes it coherent, homogeneous, and then you get something which is it can relax here a bit. So yeah.
No. So can I put you on the spot for a moment? If you were to tell me, right, if I was your client right now and we were sitting together and you want me to try to make that connection, could you talk me through how I could, you know, do some movement that might help me connect with my ribs besides just palpating?
Well, in that case, what I did so far is just like taking your hands and you really playing. Maybe we can try. I never tried it like without touching, so maybe we can try. So
Ladies
what
and
you,
gentlemen, a new
yes,
debut for Vladimir.
yeah, thank you. So what we could do is, for instance, you could lengthen your arm on the side,
Okay.
and then have your one finger on the sternum.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere maybe very close to the throat, or the end of the clavicle, somewhere here. And then maybe you can try and find the connection between your hand, if you go to the side, if you lengthen your arm and go to the side, and then find the connection, what's happening in the center. So at first, maybe some people may try and lengthen the arm without doing anything in the center. And then after a while, maybe they can find this. There are whole lessons, you know, Errol Flynn, this kind of things, but maybe we can do it in 5 minutes. So if you find this, that's a start, and then
So
you
the
can start.
difference, between just stretching the arm and then feeling the
Yes,
ribs go with the arm is
yes,
what we're going for here.
yes.
Okay.
So it's like your intention is to lengthen the arm. It's like you want to with your fingers you want to touch something which is a bit further out, and then you're really looking for
But
what's
the head
happening in the
remains
center.
more or less center, because if I was thinking
Yes,
of reaching to go to something, then my head
you
would
do
go
this.
with me,
Yeah,
right?
indeed. Yeah. So
Which is Errol Flynn, right?
well, you can do both
Right.
to play.
That's true. That's
You
true.
can
You
do
can
both.
go the opposite as well. Yeah.
So you can play with this, and then you can find like that. That's the first hint, and then you can find like other directions and look for places which would be, let's say, clearly connected in the center. So that's kind of a riddle. So if you're trying, you're looking for, okay, where is it connected with in the center, and looking for some connection in all the direction. And then you can even try and play, you know, from, back. So it takes time and curiosity and patience and, you know, delicacy and how is it, this kind of
Right.
things. You need to be delicate, but probably it's a good start.
So, and a different kind of attention, a different kind of
Yes,
attention
yes,
than we
yes.
normally pay to how we use ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, this kind of brings me right into another question, and that has to do with, you know, athletes and their training,
Mm-hmm.
and whether, I mean, in the beginning, of course, everyone has to learn, everyone has to practice, but would there come a point, for example, where someone could just substitute Feldenkrais for training, or do the two things have to go in, you know, in some kind of harmony?
Well, I have a funny story with this. There was a swimmer I used to work with uh, in the beginning of my work with swimmers, and she was quite curious. She came to me quite often to ask for Feldenkrais sessions, so I gave her sessions, and then I spoke with her coach. Of course, he was aware that she was having sessions. I spoke with her coach and asked him, like, how did she do in that competition? And he said, well, she did her best, but not better. And I was a bit disappointed. And he saw my face like being a bit disappointed. And he said, well, actually, what she didn't tell you is that actually she cut her training amount by half. So she was not going to the training anymore. She was going, let's say, 3 times a week. And yeah, with Feldenkrais, it was like she could swim well, but the training is you really need to train a lot when you're a swimmer. There are so many things that you do in the water. There are so many things that are not really addressed by Feldenkrais. Some things that you can find, like the way that you um, there are some, it's like chemistry, you know, you may start being a bit solid in the beginning of a training, and then you get like more fluid or more this, more that. And then you need to train your lungs and your heart and your muscles, and all these things are just not addressed by, you know, what we can do in Feldenkrais. So what I would say is Feldenkrais it really helps finding some spaces that you did not explore. It really helps to also avoid injuries or help the swimmer to recover from injuries. But then we could say that we help them to go on with their training. So it's really not instead of training, although in these times of confinement it could be good, but it's irreplaceable to go in the water and or at least do something which is much more physical. Like part of the swimming, it's much more about you know, really relating with the water.
Well, when you're relating with the water, of course, you're dealing with forces that
Yes.
we are not dealing with when we're lying on our backs and resting.
Yeah.
But that does bring up two questions for me about maybe applications that people might be curious about. One of them, of course, is one of the profoundly important aspects of swimming is breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And do you ever use Feldenkrais approaches to help swimmers as they breathe, or when you're working with people, they're already so high level that you don't have to worry about that?
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned it, because that was my first real intervention as a Feldenkrais practitioner. I worked with one of my former coaches with high-level swimmers, and we focused on breathing. And he made a very interesting point. He said that in swimming, there is a lot of things that are done on, let's say, being powerful, something like this. There is a lot that they know about, let's say, warming up your, let's say, your muscles and joints and you know, heart and this kind of things. But he says there is not so much about the breathing. So even in the high level swimming, I think very few people really focus on improving their breathing. And what we did, actually, we did like partly the breathing, partly something about the swimming. But I remember one of the swimmers said, because I asked them, I asked the group, like, what did you learn during this week? And some of them were very happy. They found some things, some kind of warm up before a race. So for instance, there was one swimmer. He went after that, shortly after that, like 1 year after that, he went to the Olympics in London. So he found himself, he kind of devised a way to warm up before his race. And that was like a very small move between the shoulder and the hips, like lengthening a bit when you breathe in and letting it back when you breathe out. So he found something. Some swimmers, they found some things for the swimming. And I also remember one of the swimmers which was quite reluctant, and they were asked to do it, to do the Feldenkrais. Mm-hmm. And I remember this girl, she said, well, I'm not sure if I learned something for my swimming and for my breathing, but I learned something about the fact that actually we can learn something about the breath, about the breathing. So it's just like the very idea that although it is kind of a natural phenomenon or natural process, this too is subject to learning and improving. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think it was one of the most important feedbacks that she gave. Something like, yeah, as a practitioner, I thought like, yeah, maybe I should have started with this.
Well, it reminds me of that saying of Moshe Feldenkrais that I don't teach movement, I teach learning.
Yeah.
And this idea that it's not so much that you're there to improve someone's breathing as much as to awaken the possibility that they want to learn about their own breath. Exactly. And I think, because when I'm curious, that's when I can learn. If I'm not curious, I take it for granted and nothing can happen. Which brings me to the other question that came up when you were talking about the value of continuing one's training and not just doing Feldenkrais, but we've read a lot that in a lot of sports there is this use of imagination, mm-hmm. or seeing myself doing something that does cut down on the amount of training necessary or that improves. Do you ever work with imagination with your clients, your students?
Not so much for the time being, not so much. And also in swimming, it's, how can I say, for instance, I'm thinking of pole vault. I can imagine that actually it's something really interesting to be able to imagine what you're doing, because actually every jump it's a massive amount of energy and it's a massive strain on the muscles. And so if you want to train more, it would be really interesting to be able to train without doing it. Whereas in swimming, actually the highest level swimmers, they swim between, let's say, 12 and 20 or more kilometers a day. So you can, I don't know how it is in miles, so you can imagine.
It would be about 20 kilometers would be around 16 miles or something like that. That's a lot of swimming.
Yes. So there is no problem in doing it. And actually it's a good thing that you do it. So for swimmers, actually, most of the time they just need means to just enjoy what they're doing in the water, and not doing it like without doing it. I would say that this is a difference between swimming and other sports, because actually you need to do a lot of kilometers. We have a very, I don't know how famous he is abroad, but there is a coach, Philippe Lucas, and he I would say she's kind of a magician, because every swimmer he trains is just like great. He discovered Law Manodou, who became a world champion. He made many things. And he's famous also for giving his swimmers the ability or the opportunity to swim a lot, really a lot. And sometimes you have like some swimmers, they become world champion and you think, oh yeah, they had fun in the training and so on, but actually you realize that they were swimming with him a year before or 2 years before. So they have this, you know, let's say amount of play. So maybe it answers your question. And then to end with this, let's say for a race, some people, they try to visualize what they do before the race. And me as a swimmer, actually, that this is really not what I was doing, because I felt like if I was swimming my race before the race, I was already getting tired.
So you were imagining yourself getting tired.
Yeah.
You
No,
would...
not. It's really in French we say like having juice, and this it really felt like you know, for Christmas when you don't want to open the present before it's Christmas, it really felt like this. I had my own ways of getting, let's say, warmer and being like my heart was beating like 90 or 100 a minute without doing anything, just sitting, and I was slightly sweating, so I was ready to swim, but I was not there yet. I was not, you know, swimming. And then when I swam, I would let my body do what it's been training for. So that was this, you know, patience.
So, of course, that brings up another question for me as you were talking. So then if a swimmer is about to go into a competition, does that mean that it's more preferable to start heating yourself up and getting yourself rallied before you go to swim versus bringing yourself to a centered place, a calm place, maybe doing a little bit of the bell hand so that there's not anxiety? Which is better for the swimmer?
I would say it really depends on what swimmer. You say you mentioned the competition, but there are also like swimmers who just love to swim and they are
Yeah,
not
that's
in the
different. I'm
competition.
thinking about competition right now.
Yeah. So indeed, like for a competition, I think there is this need to have your body really fully capable of you know, like giving. It's like you're training for a year and you have 1 minute to show what you learned. Yeah. So I mean, you have to imagine that. So I would say that it's much, much better to find a way of having your body getting, you know, this reaction, not reaction, this preparation for action, and not like thinking that your heart beating or this kind of thing, it's a sign of anxiety and it's bad. Actually, you can think, yeah, it's a preparation for action. So it's like savoring the moment, or being grateful that your body actually is really preparing for action. And it feels like, at least for me, it felt like, let's say you think of these steam engines that they needed to, you know, to put coal and wood hours, you know, before it would start. So it felt like this, like you just like make it hot and hot and hot, and then you have steam, and then you have power.
Got it. So warming up for sure.
Kind of like getting ready for it. Otherwise, what happens is that you won't swim bad. If you, let's say you quite relaxed and you're calm and you're not, it's like, yeah, you're joking with your friends and you're not there, you're not really with your race. Some people, maybe they can go to their race in a, you know, just like this. But most of the people, it's just like they will show what they can do, but it's a bit reduced. And at that level, you know, a few hundredths of a second or a few tenths of a second, it's quite a big change. So
Right, right. Yeah, I see. I see what you mean, and I wasn't in any way implying that that means that you should be just totally casual. I was just trying to find this feeling in the nervous system, but I hear what you're saying. So I know that you know, as with all of the people that we've been speaking to, you know, one of the questions that I wanted to address was how, if at all, your experience with the Feldenkrais method has impacted your own relationship to this idea of avowed and unavowed dreams. You know, you know the saying that Feldenkrais had, and so it you know, because you were a professional swimmer and then you shifted and then you found Feldenkrais, how have your dreams changed? Do you feel like you're realizing what you want?
well, in my case, it's maybe it's a bit more complex than usual, let's say, practitioners, because it's been, I think, now 5 years. I also did a training as a somatic experiencing practitioner. Maybe you know the work by Peter Levine. And I really love the combination because it seems to me that Feldenkrais gives me, let's say, some freedom, some intelligence of exploration, some, you know, many things to try. And also it promotes some sense of safety in my body. So there is this, like, sometimes, like, if you don't feel so safe, you can go on the floor and really do some things. So I would say it's like some safety net and also some way of organizing my development, something like this. Whereas the somatic experiencing brings something which, in my case, was really needed. As for the emotional part, some limitations I have with, let's say, relationships and this kind of things. So it's hard for me to reply in a very, you know, clear manner. But I would say it's my summary would be, it makes me more intelligent. That's actually, it was a long thing to finish with this. It made me more intelligent.
And do you feel that that connects up with your dreams for yourself, I guess, if I was to sum up the question then?
Yeah, it's but then it's in as I said, sometimes you get used to it, so it's hard to say how it would be without it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right, and I'm not going to ask you what you're missing, because then we'll go back to that thing that we were talking about earlier of, you know, looking for the pain or looking for what's lacking. We don't want to do that.
yeah, and also, yeah, you don't know what you don't know. It's
Right,
you know,
exactly.
I like this. You don't know what you don't know, so it's like I'm looking for some things. I'm not satisfied with some things, but then what's the missing piece? If I knew,
If you knew, you would know what to look for, right?
yeah.
So, do you have a quote that you want to share with the viewers?
Yes, so there is a quote by the French philosopher Henri Bergson. So I don't know how you would pronounce it in English. So the spelling is Bergson.
Right, we would say Bergson, right?
Bergson. So in the 1930s, he had the Nobel Prize for the, I think, I don't know the title in English. In French, it's l'évolution créatrice, so which is like creative evolution, maybe. So anyway, to me, like, I mean, I love him. I love the way he writes, what he writes, and so on. And I was very pleased when I read one day a quote by him saying that you should um, act as a man of as a man of thought. I don't know how in English. Is it okay?
Yeah.
You should act as a man of thought and think as a man of action. So I really like this connection, because I mean, this shows that he was not like a disembodied philosopher, but he was really connecting action, perception, all the things that we are very familiar with in the Feldenkrais method. And yeah, so I love it.
And he was a philosopher?
Yes.
Okay. Just so that if people want to try to find him, they can
Yeah.
definitely look through that. And I wanted viewers to know that Vladimir is also offering a gift. It's an awareness through movement lesson, correct, Vladimir?
Well, I went to the Caribbean not so long ago, so we decided to shoot like 2 short videos on the
Oh,
beach.
videos. Okay, great.
Yeah, and then I will give some like short ATMs, short, let's say, exploration, sensorial exploration that you can do at home.
Right, for improving your front crawl, correct?
Yes, yes.
So if you would like that, all you have to do is click on the bottom of this video and you'll be able to experience Vladimir's teaching in that way. So Vladimir, is there anything more you would like to say in conclusion to our audience or to me?
Well, maybe thank you for this lovely conversation, because like, you know, I could feel like, whoa, this is so interesting. This is so interesting. So this happens when we do it. So thank you. And well, actually, I wish all the swimmers to really enjoy swimming, because this is like, to me, the being in the water is something which is, it's really lovely conditions to feel good. So I would encourage people to really look for something which is pleasurable, and thinking and having, let's say, a different attitude towards pain, because there are some pains when you swim. Sometimes you have pain, but there are some ways to, you know, to keep swimming, to go around the pain and not like trying to bump into it. So yeah, so enjoy swimming. Um, Use the pain as an incentive to find new things, and then improve again, and it never ends.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for viewing, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you.